Hi and welcome to this fireside chat organized by Tuum and Rivo Republic. My name is Adrian. I'm partner at the consultancy Rivo Republic. And we have recently teamed up with Tuum to create a new white paper called It's Time to Build, Making the Right Technology Choices to Enable True Business Transformation in Banking. In the paper, we invite you to discover the most important market shifts happening right now in banking and fintech, the key technologies driving the industry forward, emerging business models, as well as what to look out for when choosing a core banking solution. The white paper has just been released, so I really recommend you to check it out on Tuum's website and blog. That's tuumplatform.com. And the fireside chat today is all about the second part of the white paper. It's about technological changes happening in the financial services industry, as well as the new business models that these technologies enable. So let me first introduce our guests. We're really happy that Kristian Luoma from Utopia Music has joined us today. Kristian, how are you doing?
Hello. Doing very good. Thank you for the invite.
Awesome. So Kristian is currently the Chief Strategy Officer at Utopia Music. It's a Swiss-based technology company that leverages big data in order to enhance the global music industry through increased revenues, reduced costs, accelerated payment cycles, and improved insights. Before that, Kristian was the head of OP Labs at OP Financial, which is the biggest financial group serving over 4 million customers in Finland. So Kristian, again, thanks that you take the time and join our session today. I checked on LinkedIn. You mentioned that you build innovations, stories, strategies, and products to improve life. So I would be really interested to hear from you shortly in your own words about your own background, as well as what Utopia Music is offering. That would be quite interesting to hear from you.
Thank you, Adrian. Would be happy to. I've spent my 20 years in technology, product innovation, strategy. As you mentioned, the last 10 years or so, I've been in finance industry, and it's been an exciting journey. Like, the technology has been transforming a lot of the experiences, and even though the technology has existed for a bunch of years that we consider new and novel in finance, it still sort of is the massive driving force behind creating new sorts of experiences at the very front end of customer experiences. And during my time in OP Labs, we got to build 60 different business opportunities and experiment them with real customers. Out of them, roughly 10 graduated and emerged to be something that the mothership uses still to date. I believe during that journey, we won about 20 different awards, filed roughly 10 different patents. We collaborated with over 2,500 startups around the world. We ran an innovation lab network across Europe. We were able to engage in a number of conversations around new technologies, whether that's cloud or AI or distributed ledger technologies and so forth. So it was really a high school for understanding what's next in the finance industry.
Awesome. That would be amazing to tap into your knowledge now in this session. And the second guest, as you can also see obviously on the screen, is Rivo Uibo. He is the co-founder and chief business officer at Tuum. So Rivo, would you also quickly shortly describe your own background and what Tuum is offering as well?
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Adrian and Kristian, for co-hosting this show. And yes, I'm Rivo. I'm one of the co-founders and overall head of business at Tuum. And if you ask what Tuum is an API-first, next-generation core banking infrastructure. That means that if you want to launch anything in retail or business banking services out there, we are the core infrastructure enabling you to do so. And as we love to say, that it is very easy to build something complex, but it is very complex to build something easy to use and elegant. And this is what we are super proud of, and what we think we have nailed very well with Tuum, making those complex capabilities and which are offered in a very seamless manner.
Amazing.
And professionally, I have been in the complex B2B technology space all my life, basically like operating across the globe. So happy to be part of this chat.
Yeah, that's great. I think in this circle, we now have a perfect combination of various backgrounds that are perfect for talking about new technologies plus the new business models that they enable. So let's basically jump right into one of our main topics, which are specifically the technological change in banking and how they have a lasting effect on how banking services are delivered. Because in the paper, we basically talk about new technologies that power growth innovation. We call it like the 3 fundamentals. So we have picked like 3 very, very important technological changes that any fintech or bank should really look into closely. One of the main messages is also in our paper that in order to achieve a growth trajectory, the financial services providers should really have the right tech foundation in place. And why is that? Because technology enables innovation, speed, and new business models. So understanding how these new technologies can really support your growth goals is a really important success factor. We have also thrown in quite a lot of studies in the paper that have also shown that the right investments or the investments in the right digital technologies actually can yield measurable improvements when it comes to revenue growth and also cost improvements. So that's why we also predict that in the coming years, banks, fintechs will more and more compete also on their technology architecture. That's why obviously the winners, especially after the COVID crisis, are now really building and operating the most competitive tech stack. And now, while most banks have already modernized some of their applications, data, surrounding architecture, and so on, many still rely on the, I would say, same old systems that have powered their operations for quite a while now. Just as another example of one really interesting data point that we have cited in a paper was from a study that basically analyzed banking IT spend between 2016 and 19, which was around $1 trillion, which went into IT systems, which did not really yield any revenue growth or new revenue growth for these banks, which is also one of the main messages there in the paper, that it's increasingly important to not only look at tech for the new technology's sake, but also to really couple technology with new business models, which they enable in order to achieve the best return on investment on these new technologies. So just to round it off, obviously tech debt is constraining a bank's ability to grow. That's why in the paper we have basically highlighted these 3 fundamental technological developments, which I will share in a second. But before that, I would be really interested to hear from both of you how you perceive the current technological landscape, just as a general question to jump into the topic right now. Based on your experiences, what's the role right now of technology to stay competitive in the banking industry? Maybe Rivo, if you want to take that first one.
Yeah, sure. I would say that it is really like a super interesting moment currently out there. If you look large established banks or regulated entities, they have started with all the transformation efforts and digitalization efforts, but those have like mainly and mostly touching really the kind of a front end or customer and user experience side of the things. When you go like beneath to the core infrastructure, this remains still untouched, like in most areas. So which means that this is a market which will see like a significant change and shift like in the upcoming years. Then at the same time, there are like number of front runners, especially also in the DeFi space. So it's going to be super interesting to see how far it's possible to push the tech out there. And then thirdly, there are a number of those new brands and let's say non-banks or non-regulated entities, also like Kristian from Utopia here today, who are like really making the push, like solving some, let's say, voids in the market, and at the same time leveraging the most cutting edge tech. Because why should like one build a new business on the legacy tech? If you do something new, do it also like in a way that you leverage the best of breed stuff out there. So I would say that it's really by far the most interesting times out there, even besides the fact that every single research and consulting firm, I think, has said every 3 or 5 years since already like late 80s, mid 90s, that now it's the time to modernize the tech. But yeah, like if you look like all of those macro trends beneath, then super interesting times. Kristian, handing over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree. And again, as I mentioned before, I feel like these technologies, even though that the consultants are highlighting them as new trends and coming up with different terms like they should, they've been around for quite some time. The real opportunity that technology drives, in my opinion, is access to services that were beyond access before. And that's really why companies like ours, Utopia Music, have a chance of helping the entire industry with financial services embedded within the service offering that we provide for royalty allocation management and distribution and so forth, because it's accessible. It is no longer a privilege for the banks to operate financial infrastructure. You don't no longer require, I mean, a lot of banks obviously still have thousands and thousands of engineering employed and will continue to have, but it's not a prerequisite for being able to operate and run financial services. So to me, that's really the real promise of where this cloud, microservices, infrastructure, automation, where it has taken us.
Yeah.
And you can find parallels and analogies from every single other industry, how technology has become more accessible and anybody can embed financial services as part of their core processes, just like we've done.
Yeah, fully agree. But how did you actually manage the whole technology landscaping at the OP Lab? Was it part of your responsibility there as well? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a thing called Technology Innovation Roadmap, which we regularly updated together with the leadership team and was basically owned by the CTO. Okay. And the thesis there was that we basically broke down the operations down to different value streams. And we did an exercise, which I love to call the infinite technology game. It's basically a sort of a mind exercise that if technology wouldn't be an obstacle, how would different value streams work? And usually you end up into discussion where you understand that really the value of technology is making things faster, cheaper, more accessible, easier to use. That's always the case. Like that should be the North Star, where in every single value stream, whether that's lending or managing accounts or opening accounts or whatever, like those are the drivers for using technology, making it faster, easier, cheaper, more accessible. And as we did that roadmap, we were able to lay out different technologies as they emerge, whether that's like quantum computing or distributed ledger, and make an analysis of like how would they, in a specific value stream that we operate, increase our chances of reaching that infinite technology state. Yep. And based on that roadmap, it was relatively easy to explore, pick and choose. And you kind of came into the same conclusion that you're outlining in the white paper, that unless we're able to manage a certain set of layers, whether that's regulation or account management or lending as a service, anybody that is willing to entertain a chance of operating a competitive pricing scheme or profit margin for operations is going to be screwed unless they focus on those chances that are accessible and available. So really, that's what's going on in my opinion in technology landscape. It is not about the sort of well-hyped distribution ledger technology. It is about how do you realize that opportunity of making it accessible or cheaper to operate.
Fully agree. No, that's really interesting, and I also feel your point around.
And if I may still add on that, like,
please.
When I say operations, I think one of the most painful things that I saw during my career in finance is that whenever you want to change a parameter of an existing product offering, that's when you get into a mess of like different integration points and touch points needing to be addressed in a different way that adds operative costs to existing products than just running the cloud-based service. And that's really where, when you think about the future architecture of financial infrastructure, you need to realize that it's not just the cloud cost of running the service. I mean, it should be. But in addition, you have cost of operation when it comes to integration and maintaining the integrations between the endpoints. So like it was discussed in the introduction, I think that's really what the architects within finance need to pay attention to today.
That's a really good point.
And Kristian, I think it's also like interesting to highlight that I think the stuff that you do now at Utopia Music, it's also super good that you have this long time experience from the hardcore banking industry, which also means that you do not take certain topics too lightly or let's say in a naive way, but rather those decisions and ways forward have a serious ground. So that I think there is much more much more meat on the bone than many other, let's say, newcomers in this industry might have otherwise.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it is a competitive advantage. We have a bunch of like fintech backgrounded people here, and it's only fair. Like we call ourselves a fintech platform within music.
All right. Amazing. Yeah, just to kind of go back to that point around hyping up technological change. I fully agree. Like I feel your point. It's probably something that never stops, right? You're not done with digital transformation. Like there's not an end point towards that. However, just like one point around that, which we'll come back later as well. There is like increasing evidence that after a crisis, especially the next years after, for example, now after the COVID-19 crisis, are extremely important for value creation. So that has been seen also in the last financial crisis. For example, the banks that have really rebuilt their systems and built up new revenue streams, they have been the ones that have been creating the most value in the industry over the next decade. So that's why we have also put in that message that now is the time to build and to really rethink how you're operating and so on, because it's also a critical time at the moment, actually. And yeah, I would say let's quickly go through the three fundamentals, like the three technologies that we have outlined in the paper, just to cover them as well. Of course, we have them very extensively explained in the white paper. So if anyone is interested to go deeper, then I would definitely recommend to check that out. But the first one is the cloud. Kristian already mentioned there are many technologies that now kind of decrease the barrier of entry into the banking system. So that's why we have outlined basically cloud technologies which allow banks and fintechs to launch new products and services way faster than before. It kind of really unlocks therefore new innovation opportunities, and it allows basically cloud consumers to benefit from economies of scale, because before that you had really kind of large capex investments into your own infrastructure, data centers, server parks, and so on. And now you can basically enter the game by teaming up with the well-known providers like AWS, Google Cloud, and so on. They give you the cloud infrastructure, they maintain it, they run it. They're basically designed for scalability. So while they do the heavy lifting, you as a fintech or bank can then really focus your development efforts on the value-adding, customer-centric activities instead of thinking about infrastructure too much. And beyond that, most banks, fintechs that we've seen that leverage cloud computing have also better organizational agility and kind of shorter time to market of new propositions. So that's how we basically summarize it in the paper, that cloud technology can, if you use it the right way, there are some pitfalls and some other considerations that are really important, which we outline in the paper. But overall, it allows you to basically create and scale your digital services and products at much faster speeds, and that's a really compelling, actually, competitive advantage in this whole banking environment right now. So anything that maybe also Rivo again that you would like to add to cloud technologies and how they have enabled banks to become faster, increase the speed in their operations?
Absolutely. And I think one of the topics which is not mentioned quite often, but what the cloud provides to every institution, let it be a large regulated bank or let it be a newcomer or the Utopia type of company out there, is the self-reliance, which means that those cloud environments offer you already like all the tool sets and toolkits like to do the stuff on your own. There are like different SDKs and ways of which you can leverage and to really like set up the stuff, operate the stack, and launch super rapidly, which means that it also contributes to the like overall aspects of like product management. You have a hypothesis, you want to rapidly test it out. If it works, then you like scale and so forth. So that really the, let's say, leveraging the aspects of cloud, it increases your self-reliance, and that means faster time to market and also many more ways how to scale your business. And also, I definitely think that the second key element is that the future is like also concerning the usage of multi-cloud environments. I think there won't be, let's say, just one type of a provider that somebody needs to select, that I go only with AWS, I go only with Google Cloud or whatsoever, because that is the third derivation, and that is that the future is all about the mashup of services. You plug and play different capabilities from different vendors, and quite often nowadays all the new players are offering their capabilities like in a cloud native format.
Yep.
So many good ways out there.
That's a great point. If I may add a controversial point to the mix, now not officially being employed by a bank, I can sort of like obviously not discuss about the details, but cloud was a hot potato 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Whenever I met with my colleagues in different innovation labs around Europe, it was discussed as one of the fastest emerging things to come into the boardrooms as a topic. And not always in a positive light. Like, let's face it, whenever something new happens, we humans are sort of scared about the consequences of that. And especially security concerns were highlighted time and time again. Now, that being said, when I stopped the position in the bank officially, and obviously still working in fintech context, the narrative had changed 180 degrees.
Okay.
And the consensus around the industry was that cloud is going to be an important improvement step for the security as well, which is obviously, as we all understand, vital and fundamental for all the banks when it comes to operations. And the rationale, as the experts were giving the explanation, was that in our own developed infrastructure, there are layers of years and years of experience, which is sometimes beneficial, but when it comes to operation and making sure that like nothing leaks and no security holes remains, that is very, very, very challenging talent to keep up to date and expensive. So you could argue, and this was made as a statement, that cloud infrastructure will be in the long term more secure to maintain as the software stack and the cloud stack becomes more normalized and standardized. So I think that's an additional benefit that usually doesn't get enough recognition because of the stigma of the past.
Yeah.
But cloud can be safe and fast to execute.
And absolutely, like to add on top of Kristian's point, then if you look the size of the R&D budget that any single major cloud vendor has, then all the tools and data points which they can use to like develop the like algorithms for different like intrusion prevention and so forth, like this set of resources, this is like way beyond any single institution's capabilities. That means that I think this kind of a message now has really started to spread, and the understanding has come along. And also, like, we need to say, let's say, a few good words of, like, to the regulators, that also they have, let's say, started to obtain this information and share it with others. Because if the regulators don't understand, they don't know what to regulate and what kind of protection to provide. So that it's a kind of a multifaceted thing out there. But completely agree with Kristian, so that sometimes those things, let's say, stay on the background, but those are like absolutely critical points, because it's impossible to underestimate the value of security and scalability out there whenever something concerns the wealth or health. Absolutely.
I think the stigma is already disappearing as well, because you see actually more and more really large scale global banks entering, let's say, in large partnerships with the well-known cloud providers as well. So I think from that perspective, there has been a mindset shift as far as I can see as well.
Absolutely.
Then I would say, let's continue with like the two other big technological changes that we have been outlining in the white paper. And I would say, let's summarize that one, because otherwise we will be, I think we could talk about the whole technologies quite a while. And after that, we then continue with the new business models. But the two other really important ones that we have highlighted in the paper are microservices and application programming interfaces, APIs. As we already mentioned also microservices. So that's I think a very important technology to mention here, because in the past you had usually very monolithical IT architectures. I think the term like spaghetti bowl is often dropped when talking about like incumbent technology architectures. So they have been kind of bulky, intertwined collection of systems and architectures. And I think usually, like, I would say you need to respect that as well, because that's just how many banks have been building up their systems at a time where you just had to develop a lot of stuff in-house, and through acquisitions and geographical expansion, of course, that adds up to your stack. But now, in contrast to that, I think microservices are an amazing technology because they basically consist of like smaller, loosely coupled modules that can cover specific functionalities. They have become really popular, especially across neobanks and digital-first banks that have been building on microservices. And it's because the underlying architecture has proven to be super resilient, secure, easier to maintain. One reason for that is, for example, if one microservice fails, then it can be easily isolated and fixed, while the whole system still can keep running. And also, I think due to like the autonomous nature of these microservices, it kind of also actively empowers teams inside banks to build new stuff and to adopt and build new solutions on their own. So yeah, I think that's why microservices is extremely important to mention. And the second one with APIs, I would say that it's a whole topic of its own. It's more an enabler of, it's more a means to a larger end, right? As with most technologies, but internally they really allow teams to share data and make them available to other teams, which is in the white paper we call it inter-company and intra-company ecosystems that you can build up by using APIs. It's been a topic that has been popping up also due to new regulations like open banking that put APIs really front and center. And also, I think what's in that context really, really important to mention is that when you open up as an organization and use APIs as like a standard exchange of data with other organizations, that can really boost a whole new ecosystem to emerge. And that's why we talk about that quite a lot in the white paper as well, that they also allow any brand nowadays to integrate financial data, but also financial capabilities into their own propositions, which is now hyped up under the term embedded finance. But it will definitely have an impact on how financial services are distributed. So yeah, I would be really interested to hear also from your side, based on microservices and APIs. Is there anything that you would like to add for our audience to understand better why these technologies are quite impactful in the financial services industry?
Well, I guess my perspective to that, like what I referred to earlier, is that it's no longer about just the CapEx or the cloud infrastructure OpEx cost, and the fundamental element which we need to be able to manage is the cost of integrations between different products and the time to market when building the products, and that's really where these two things are coming to play in a meaningful way. Microservices, as amazing as it is also very, very difficult. So it takes years and years of practice to get it down to an art where the infrastructure makes sense. It's kind of a different mindset, but once you have that, it can be a huge accelerant to the way we deploy products, way we try out new propositions, and that's really where the value comes from. So the cost of creating something new, cost of changing something that is being operated, and that, as was outlined, will be an unfair competitive advantage for companies that are seeking to be technology first in banking.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe to, let's say, highlight few thoughts from Tuum's side, that first and foremost, APIs are the way how the value gets delivered. So that if, for example, Kristian and the team at Utopia does something, they think in terms of the customer journeys in a seamless end-to-end format. Like if I would be an artist, I wouldn't want to operate in like 3-4 different types of environments. I want to be on a one consistent, seamless customer journey. If it includes like any of the financial services capabilities, then on our end at Tuum, it's our responsibility to open up those kind of capabilities. So that APIs, they are basically the enablers for kind of a seamless service offering out there. Yep. Then the second key aspect, what concerns the APIs, and what we are very proud of at Tuum, is that we are already born as API first, which means that if you look many other players out there, they have built something monolithic, and then they see that there is a demand for APIs on the market, and then they try to complement the monolith with the APIs, whereas it's completely different when you look at our offering out there. We have understood that you need to be also like developer friendly, who consumes those APIs, which means that everything is designed already to be API first. So, and that is, let's say, significantly different approach. And of course, all the good stuff that comes along with the like releasing things and all the versioning capabilities and so on. So a lot of, let's say, good aspects that that many businesses can benefit from.
Yeah. Fully agree. What do you think is like the main reason why there are some, of course, that's a really tricky question because every banking player is different, but do you think there are some patterns that you see why some banks are not really able to adopt new technologies and leverage them the right way versus, you know, that still struggle with tech debt versus others that have been making the jump into new technologies? Kristian, you mentioned like mindset. Is it a board mindset thing? Is it more budget and structure thing? Is it, yeah, what do you think? Are there some patterns or is it just really individual per bank?
Yeah, I guess it has a lot to do with the fact that like for all the right reasons in finance industry, you don't really mess around. Like you don't take risks that are unnecessary. The industries are fairly well established and static, and basically how you make profit is by changing as little things as you can. It kind of reminds me of the joke of the old sort of like car driving with square tires and not having time to change into a round one because like it takes time. So it is understandable that people who are under high pressure are focused on the next quarter results, fairly often want to take those chances, which may pay off like 2-3 years after the investment. I don't think that, you know, is the case at the moment. Like I think the return on investment is much shorter in a lot of the cloud technology related investments right now. But like just not having the data points, just not having the expertise, potentially the IT people have been around for years and years and they have built the previous 2 generations of the banking stack. So those things all add up. It does require a bit of a spirit, or did require a bit of a spirit of like researching and adventures with the new technology 10 years ago. But right now, I don't think anybody has a good rationale not to invest in microservices, APIs, and cloud technology within banking. It is a must do if you want to secure the profits in the future quarters.
Mm-hmm. Rivo, are there like specific reasons or like patterns that you see of customers that deploy Tuum, specific triggers that now kind of influence them to really utilize new technologies? Do you think that there are some specific patterns that you can share?
I think there is one interesting element, and this definitely concerns also like chasing the new cash on the market and trying to find like the new revenue streams and growth patterns. That means that like even up to very recently, what the banks built was mainly for their own internal use to like, let's say, some sort of capability to be used by the, let's say e-banking applications or like any of the like internal back office tools or whatsoever. So now what we see as a common trend of customers utilizing Tuum's core banking infrastructure is that such kind of a microservice and API first offering enables those accounts to also operate in multiple modes. First and foremost, of course, consume those capabilities for their own good, but secondly, also to expose themselves to different ecosystems and offer and monetize those capabilities to other like third-party providers out there. And I think this is a significant change, and also like this touches very closely today's like embedded banking topics out there, because if you can't really expose those capabilities to other like actors out there, then no good use. So I think that this is just basically the beginning of the story. And if you look down the line also more into the DeFi and Web3 type of environments, where basically we could look those kind of environments as like business communication networks, then the first prerequisite is that you have to be able to expose your capabilities to every single actor in a meaningful, secure, and scalable way.
Yeah, fully agree. I think that's really interesting, and also a good transition to the second part of this session, which is the new business models that these new technologies enabled. I already mentioned it before. I think it's really important that tech is not just seen for the technology's sake, but also really in the light of the new business models and new revenue streams that you can gain by utilizing these new technologies. So that's why we have also included this one section in the white paper, which is called "The Future is Embedded: New Business Models in the Area of Embedded Banking." And just based on what Rivo has just been saying around their kind of cutting edge work in co-banking technologies, and also the project work that we've done with fintechs and banks at Rivo Public, we basically ideated 4 typical business models that will probably emerge and are already emerging in the banking industry. These really range from aggregators, orchestrators, digital banks, as well as platforms, which we explain in detail in the paper as well. I would quickly explain 2 of them, which I find very interesting, and then I would like to hear your opinion on what do you think, how this whole landscape will evolve, and what business models you find most interesting. The first one would be aggregators, which we've seen popping up from, for example, the likes of Revolut or Apple. So brands that either come from the financial services industry or from the outside, from big tech, for example, that have built up a huge brand equity. So people know them quite well. They also trust them in most cases. And these aggregators really focus on the customer experiences and developing and owning the end client relationships. And that's what we've been seeing as like companies that are really focusing on getting a lot of customers in specific segments and verticals, focusing on the customer experience, and then tailoring their services as kind of really integrated solutions for their specific customers. For example, in Apple's case, it will be the Apple Card in partnership with Goldman Sachs. So these are like brands that more and more also move into the banking industry that have not been there before, and kind of open up this whole new competitive landscape. And the second one would be platforms. So I already mentioned also Goldman Sachs. They have developed their own banking as a service unit, for example, and opened up their, as Rivo mentioned, capabilities to third parties as well, like Apple. So and these platforms, I would also place Tuum in that bucket as well, because they provide the infrastructure, the banking functionalities, in some cases even the balance sheet and regulatory licensing as a service that for others. So I think these are like players that have been popping up as well in different markets in Europe. What do you think are like changes in banking business models? I think there are now platform business models where you rent out and expose your capabilities and data to others. There are business models where you really just focus on owning the customer relationship and adding third-party services to make that more tailored for your customer groups. Are there specific business models that you find most interesting that are currently emerging in the industry? Kristian?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Those are really the right categories to make based on the platform theory. I don't think we've really seen the first beginning of the platform revolution within finance, but we will surely see that. And really the case examples that you're pointing out there are already giving the breadcrumbs, but we will be seeing much more versatile service offering as part of the different endpoints that we consume as our main banking propositions being completed by different vendors being serviced through the same portfolio. So that's definitely a key trend. So you can't really no longer say that like you have years and years of product development and so many products, and that'll give you a competitive advantage, because these new entrants will be able to compile the same equivalent level service offering with much less work involved. So that's definitely a trend. The other thing that I think might be slightly missing there is that like the way I see embedded financing as well really changing the landscape, and it is grounded on those fundamentals that you outline in the paper, is that we will see reduction of effort required from the customers to consume a financial service. If there's any power on the face of earth that is strongest when it comes to customer behavior, it is that the fact that people are lazy. We don't want to click. We don't want to go from one service to another. And that's really what embedded finance at its best means to me, that like the service providers who are deep in a vertical, deep in an industry, are able to pull in those financial services components and create a much more fluid experience for the purpose that their customers are using the service for. And that's really obviously near and dear for our heart. What we are doing with financial services, for instance, is that we're making sure that the artists are getting paid faster based on accelerating the royalty payouts. And the way we are doing it is textbook embedded finance. We are enabling the distributors to have access to financial products right there where the customer interaction happens. So you don't have to take income statements or proof of payments to another place, to a bank, like you had to in the before digital age, but you're able to do it in one flow. And that's the value add, like the fluidity of one flow, playing to the sort of lazy nature of people. Like, if we can do it simpler, we humans tend to want to do that. And that's a powerful business model change, where there will be new stakeholders earning a slice of that revenue. The vertical experiences providing the access to the service will be earning a cut from the financial services. But on the other hand, there will be platforms underneath that will be aggregating a lot of customer interaction through that, and will be able to reduce their customer acquisition cost dramatically. So it'll be a fundamental shift for them as well. And if you want to remain isolated island and you don't want to integrate within the customer interactions, you will be missing out on this opportunity.
I'm sure Rivo has his own opinion as well.
Absolutely, I tend to agree with Kristian, like in like most of the aspects. And also, to highlight, my thinking is that two key aspects. That if you look at the business models, then definitely, let's say, emerging brands are taking a far bigger cut and embedding financial services into their main offering. And secondly, the second business model will be like the infrastructure play, because you need still somebody to do the heavy lifting. And but it's not anymore the isolated island as Kristian highly pointed out. But when combining these two aspects, they are clearly seeing the trend that the boundaries between distinct industries are blurring. And why? This is because people and businesses, they have aspirations. You don't want to, let's say, do banking. If you're an artist, you really want to get your fair pay much sooner than, let's say, in a regular fashion. Like, if you're a householder and your aspiration is a green home, you don't want to think in terms of the getting the solar panels and speaking with the bank to get the financing for those. You have aspiration to have a green home and to get the benefits of the solar power. So that this is really taking, let's say, the step towards fulfilling the aspirations and making things accessible in a very seamless manner in one pass, basically, as Kristian explained.
Yeah. No, fully agree. Maybe let's make that a little bit more tangible, what we also mean with aggregator. For example, I've been recently supporting a bookkeeping software as a service tool, which has been super successful and got a lot of customers. However, they also felt pressure in their own competitive software category that they need to provide better services to their small business customers that do the bookkeeping with their system. So they have been thinking about integrating financial services as well, just to provide one integrated service where you go for your bookkeeping and you have your banking already attached in there as well. So let's say a business current account, expense cards, even business loans that can use the real-time accounting data for better underwriting. So there are massive opportunities for these kind of aggregators, as we call them, that already have a lot of customers on their platform, but they still need to go to their, let's say, isolated bank or log into the online banking just to do a payment, for example. So why wouldn't you want to do that in the interface you already use on a daily basis? I think that's a no-brainer for many brands that have in B2C and B2B that have already a lot of customers to really integrate these financial services, get therefore also new revenue streams. And this bookkeeping tool then, of course, turned to a platform that then delivered these services for them, because obviously they didn't want to have, or they also don't have the regulatory expertise and so on, and they don't need to, because they can use these platform players to actually help them out with integrating the services. And I think that is really, really interesting, and it has massive implications on, I would say, one part in the financial industry where you have the manufacturing, the balance sheet providers, the regulated entities, which are still extremely important. And it is, I think, also a monetizable asset to be a regulated entity and to provide the balance sheet as the basic infrastructure. But then on the other hand, you probably have the distributing parties, like the focus on origination, a focus on the customer experience. And I think it's interesting to see the split in terms of embedded finance players versus the platform players. And you both have already beautifully described how this whole landscape can emerge, where you have users that are lazy. They expect financial services just to be integrated nowadays. Like I think this typical example is when you just leave the Uber car, you have paid already, so you don't need to think about that payment anymore. I think that's the ultimate goal, that you don't need to really think about financial services specifically.
Absolutely, and that example that you outlined sounds like something that me and Rivo were working on, and got awarded for the best loan product in Europe. I can't remember the year, but it was like 4 or 5 years ago when we slapped it onto a leading accounting platform in the Nordics.
Exactly, and I think these type of services you see more and more happening right now. So that these companies waking up that there might be really cool opportunities in actually embedding financial services more tailored for their customer groups. Yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah, just to wrap it off, like that's how we basically see the landscape evolving as well, that you have like the users in the center, high expectations, but still lazy. So you want to give them the right tool, financial tool, in the right context. Many brands around these users, fighting for users, fighting for attention and so on, which now is not only, let's say, a local bank competing against another local bank, but it's really all the banks fighting for users against, and then you also have big tech companies, you have fintechs, you have specialized financial players, you have software players and so on, that are all now trying to integrate these financial services, tailor them for the user base. That's like the third element that we see here. And then outside, as like the key pillars that still hold the whole system together, we see the license holders and the balance sheet providers that provide the necessary infrastructure to make all of this happen. So that's why I think this will be really interesting to see how it will play out, especially after the COVID crisis, which has already been a big wake-up call for many banks to really look at their systems, if they're resilient in a crisis, and now also going after the crisis to go forward and really check what technologies you can use to build new business models. As we mentioned, cloud, microservices, APIs would be is almost a no-brainer to have these in your roadmap nowadays. And my last question to both of you would be more long-term one. Now we have talked about these new technologies and emerging business models, but how do you think will the financial services landscape really look like long-term, let's say in 10 years, like in 2031? Maybe also, Kristian, from your perspective, how will artists be paid in 10 years, and how will that industry have evolved by then?
Yeah, I think those two are strongly related. So what we're fighting for is fair play for every play, and the most dramatic problem at the moment in the music industry is the severe lag in payment delays. There's other problems also related to allocation of royalties, but that is our focus. So by then, the artists will be paid just like the rest of us on a monthly basis regularly, and they will have a great deal of flexibility when it comes to their earnings. Unlike today, they may have to wait for 2 years, even 3 years for some cases, to get their revenue back. But on a broader strokes, I feel like in the banking landscape, what will facilitate us completing our mission and what will impact other industries as well is that like consumers will have a greater degree of choices when it comes to accessing the services that they need in the touch points that they use every day, as we outlined. So the concept of embedded finance will be happening, and as that will happen, it will naturally limit the choice of providers. Nobody wants to see a NASCAR wall when they go to the accounting platform. They might want to see some recommended options, but they will naturally gravitate towards the sort of trusted brands made available through the experiences. And my gut feeling is that as that happens, the concept of local will change fundamentally. So the generation 1 or 2 generations ago, we chose the banking provider based on the trust that we would have based on the local business proximity and knowing the chief of the bank.
Yeah.
In the future, those limitations will be, who's accessible in the service that I already trust and use. And yeah, I think we will see a lot of consolidation happening when it comes to the providers.
All right.
Yes, and I also tend to believe that a lot of consolidation will happen. And I would love to throw, let's say, few key trends also like taking place, which will basically define also the way let's say, financial services are going to be offered in the future. Because we really need to admit that currently the great wealth transfer from our parents to the younger generation is going to take place. That's crazy. And also like, I mean, all the amount of like real estate and company shares and so forth, which are quite often like illiquid assets. So definitely the emergence of like secondary markets make it and increase liquidity on the market. Then also definitely the creator and artist economy, where also like Kristian and Utopia are operating, like greater influence and many more tools and services around for those guys. How to like basically register the entity, how to have the account or a wallet, how to have those advanced pays, and also how to get the royalties and so on. So a lot to like look out there for. And of course, like younger generations out there with the like experience economy, where you really want to basically maybe consider money as something, let's say, something small, something like atomic unit, which is also like a flowing element and you have a constant access to, and of course, like all the financial inclusion aspects. So that I think those elements are all going to drive, let's say, the way how the financial services are gonna offered in the future. But the key aspect is that they have to solve some specific issue out there. And as cool technology is, technology always will be the answer or enabler to those topics out there. So that you can build the greatest tech, but if it doesn't have a, let's say, a real life purpose or a meaning, then there will be no use of it. And we'll be super happy to follow also that what you guys do out there at Trust Republic. Want to see also how Utopia does revolutionize the fair pay part out there. So I think there is, let's say, many great things to keep the eyes open what will happen.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so from my side then, that's Rivo, an amazing roundup actually of the matters and issues and topics that we have covered in the session. So I would like to thank you both, Rivo and Kristian, for participating and taking the time to participate in our second session. To the audience, I would say, if you're interested in the topics that we just talked about, and if you want to dive deeper, get to know more about them, have a look at tuumplatform.com, where you can then download our latest white paper. And Rivo and Kristian, thanks a lot and have a nice day.